All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Sara Elnakib, and I am the department chair of the Family Community Health Sciences Department at Rutgers Cooperative Extension. It is my great pleasure to have today a fireside chat with Mark Dinglasan from the governor's office. He is the first food security advocate of the state and one of the only in the country. And so we're very excited to kind of meet him today and learn a little bit about him. We have a few questions that we're going to kind of keep it casual and ask Mark, and then hopefully we can take any questions at the end that we'll send him in an email. So the first is about your background, Mark. So I'd love for folks to hear about your background in juvenile justice and how it impacts your work in food security.
Thanks, Sarah. And let me start off by saying hi to all of my colleagues that are participating in this conversation. I know there's a lot of you that are a part of this event that I have been collaborating with for years. You, Sarah, are one of those folks. So everybody, Sarah says we're keeping it cash. So we're going to see if we can succeed in doing this. Sorry I can't be with you all in person, but we'll just be in conversation together long after this virtual event. So I'm looking forward to working with you all. So some of you actually may not know it, but Sarah mentioned it. And thank you, Sarah, for allowing me to ground the conversation in this. So as Sarah said, my name is Mark. I have been doing this work in community building and diversity and equity and justice for, I think, going on 18, 19 years now. I started my career actually building homes and youth programs and social programs in the slums in the Philippines, and then ended up building the next stage of my career in juvenile justice and diversity and community building work in the Midwest, primarily in Chicago. And I came home to New Jersey. I am a New Jersey native, so relax, everybody. It's not a Chicagoan telling New Jersey how to do food security work. I came home to New Jersey in 2017, and all of my work in juvenile justice and diversity completely to this day informs how I approach this work, how I feel this work could potentially be done. So I was the head of an organization in Chicago that was advocating for kids that became involved in the juvenile justice system. And I think, Sarah, I've mentioned these numbers to you before. By the time I left Chicago in April of 2017, there were 5,800 kids in the system, and there were an additional 254 kids in lockup. And our presiding judge, overseeing all of those cases, we had 14 judges and one presiding judge, and she would have these monthly meetings where she would bring us into the room. We would talk about the most pressing needs and matters we were all addressing in our departments. But she would always say, and it stuck with me to this day, she would always say, how do we get to the point where we are empowering families enough so that kids are not being pulled out of the home? Right? Because by the time kids would get to me and my program and my team, I felt like we were at least a year to 2 years behind the 8 ball. So when I came home to New Jersey, my choices were go into juvenile justice or go into the community building food access side of things. And I took over a large organization where I said to myself, my gosh, we can build partnerships and programs that could be the very thing that Judge Martin used to say in Chicago all the time. We could really try and empower families enough so that kids are never being pulled out of the home. And that's a lot of the experiences of those kids, those families are burned into my heart and mind in a positive way. And I think that drives a lot of my inspiration and a lot of me keeping myself accountable to this work.
Yeah, and I can definitely attest to Mark's interest in and passion in people, right? And so I remember when you first came into your role, you really were focused on your employees and just making their lives better, right? And giving people a living wage and giving them insurance and just kind of the bare minimum, taking care of the people who take care of people, right? And so I think that really was something that resonated with me and made me feel that your heart is in the right place and you know exactly what we need to move forward. So
Thanks, Sarah. Actually, you know what? If I may, I was driving on the radio. I heard something that kind of affirmed for me the approaches I had been taking for the last 5 years. The thing, Sarah, hurt people. A lot of us use it, right? Especially when we're doing program development. Well, on the radio, they said, there's this saying, hurt people, but if you take it in the other direction, healed people can heal people, right? And when I heard that, I said to myself, man, that's what it's got to be about. And that's really what, for the last 5 years, I was trying to do, build a place of work and an organization where people can heal, and then make it their responsibility to reach back and lift up the next generation of people who need help. And that tagline is not mine, the reach back and lift up. That's from Judge Ann Williams, who I also worked for. She was the first African-American woman on the federal bench in Illinois. And she's the one who taught me a lot of, and brought me up in the diversity work. And I remember that saying stuck with me. How can you make it to the point where young people and families can be the ones themselves reaching back and lifting up the next person who needs help?
Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, speaking of sayings, something I've heard you say multiple times is about how fighting hunger has nothing to do with feeding people, right? And so that's a very interesting perspective. And if you could share some of your philosophy around how best collectively we can fight hunger, and in this lens of, not just feeding people, but moving beyond that.
Sure. So let me first say that I can't take credit for that actual saying. So the actual saying, for those of you that don't know that, everybody in here who's worked with me for at least 2 years has heard me say this saying and is like, oh my gosh, I'm so sick of hearing Mark say it. You're not saying that. I know you're not. The actual saying is ending hunger has nothing to do with giving people food. So let me give you, Sarah, and all of you here, the context behind that. It was August of 2017, and I was, 3 months into my new role in New Jersey in food access. And I was at an urban agriculture and anti-hunger brainstorming session in Baltimore. And we were on a location with an old historic house, and there was an urban ag operation right next door. There was moments where we would even walk to the operation. And I remember we were in a brainstorming session and we were talking about supporting urban agriculture and food systems. And I wish I could remember where this leader was from. I know she was from the East Coast, and she said, ending hunger has nothing to do with giving people food. And at that point, I was at the point where I was saying, in my new role, I know I want to take this organization from emergency food to food access and food justice. But in order to manage that kind of major change, especially with the board, there has to be a grounding principle, a central principle that I can hang my hat on and say, this is what we're working toward. And for those of you that specialize in change management, organizational development, it's got to be something that's punchy but easily digestible, but also easily communicable. Communicable? Is that a word, Sarah? Is that a word? It is. So
the spreadable, I think, the communicable means spreadable, yeah.
Okay, so there you go. So when I heard this colleague of mine say that, I said, my God, that's what it is. And when I took that home to New Jersey, obviously I had to redefine that for my work and what I wanted to go. And so for me, Sarah, to your question, what does that mean to me? Ending hunger has to be about more than giving people food. Feeding people is about giving people food, right? But ending hunger, in my opinion, is about wrapping supportive services around the individuals and families that are coming to us for help so that they have the power to go out for equitable opportunities to compete for services and opportunities themselves. And I remember when I was in the interview process for the organization that I was running, related to this idea of how ending hunger has to be about more than giving people food, I told the board of directors at that time, if you hire me, we're going to operate very differently, because we were going to look at what it means to create holistic supports for people to us that are coming, holistic supports for people that are coming to us for help. And an example I'll share with you, Sarah, I'm Filipino, and in my country, in my culture, the way we welcome you, especially in the provinces, to our towns, is we break bread with you, we eat with you. If you have any Filipino American friends and you go to their house, especially to the house of their moms and their dads, it's, have you eaten yet? Let's eat. Or if you go to the provinces of the Philippines, and this is when I was a mission worker, this is what it would be like when we would go into the provinces. We would eat with the chiefs and the townsfolk. So here for us, if we're really talking about moving the needle, if we're really talking about ending hunger, if we're really talking about food security, how do we use food as the starting point to a conversation about nutrition, about access to services, about decreasing stigmas when it comes to accessing those services, when it comes to empowering families? And then how do we use that kind of work to inform policies and systems change?
Yeah, no, that's excellent. Absolutely. And I've definitely broken bread with you multiple times, so I can attest to the kind of generosity and kind of the culture for sure. Right. So the kind of last question is really about your current office. So the Office of the Food Security Advocate is a new position to New Jersey, and one of the only positions like it across the US. And so what is your vision for this position? How would you measure your success in this role?
Thank you for the question. And let's be clear with everybody as well. For those of you that know me, I'm a fan of not recreating the wheel. So once I knew that I was the one who was going to be appointed to this position, Sarah, I was actually doing it while you and I were in DC for the White House Conference on Hunger and Nutrition. I was actively seeking other food security advocates. So for those of you that are listening, this office is unique among other food security advocate offices in the country because the New Jersey office sits in the executive branch of state government, working collaboratively with all the departments, right? Whereas other food security advocates, you've got a lot of city food security advocates. I think of the food security advocate in Seattle, DC, Baltimore, Pittsburgh has a food security advocate. So this office is unique because of where it sits in state government. A little background for everybody as well. When I first learned about this legislation, I was so excited as a community-based leader to hear that this was here. I forget, Sarah, if you and I had talked about the opportunities, maybe we did, maybe we didn't, that this office could accomplish in partnership with everybody in community. So I heard about it in 2021, was supportive of it, got the call asking if I was interested in competing to be the one running the office in early 2022. And in my mind, when I was signing all the petition that this office should be created, and I was putting my name behind it saying, we need this in New Jersey. We all know what the legislation says, right? So, and if you don't, this office is supposed to help coordinate food security efforts in the state, advocate for and support policies that support food security work. We have to establish a hotline or some mechanism that can help families be more educated about what food security efforts are out there. And then we have to create a strategic plan for what food security looks like. That's what the legislation says. When I was signing the petition, yes, that's what the legislation said. But in my mind, Sarah, I was thinking to myself, my gosh, we could have a statewide office that can bring people together collectively so we can talk. For those of you that are coalition managers, I mean, NJFDC is a coalition in and of itself. And you all know how that could be a full-time job in and of itself, right? And then, so having an office dedicated to bringing multi-sector partners together to build common language and common understanding about how we want to move the needle. What work will we tackle together? Where do we agree and where do we not disagree? And how can we take all of those conversations and create actionable steps? And how can we make sure that those actionable steps are also informed by best practices around being community driven and community focused and being outcome centric, and obviously tracking our output as well. My hope and what I will do for as long as I'm the one driving the bus, right, in this office, is pursuing all of the goals that the legislation for this office has, but also pursuing what I just described to you all. And then how will we measure success, Sarah? Outcomes. Part of what I will do is build a team and using knowledge and best practices from New Jersey and also nationally, create the frameworks, the logic models, and the definitions of outcomes that we will use to say, these are our targets, these are the timeframes for when we hope we can accomplish these targets. Here are the outcomes, short, mid, and long term, and how will we measure the success of these goals from year over year over year.
Yeah, that's absolutely so inspiring. I'm so excited to kind of see that in
Aren't you though?
It really is.
Everyone, she really is so excited.
I know, we talk about this all the time. It's like really bad.
She's not lying. Yeah, like we text back and forth about this stuff. So
yeah, but so you kind of mentioned coalitions and something that we've talked about before that I'd love to kind of bring up to the forefront is this idea of like food policy councils, right? And places for multiple community stakeholders to come together to try to present actionable changes, right? Outcome focused initiatives that move the needle on food security. And from my perspective, and we've talked about this before, that it has to be on the local level, right? Like it has to be on like a county or multiple cities, a regional level to really have substantive change, right? Because once you get too broad and too big, it becomes really, really hard to make it work everywhere, right? And so we both worked in Paterson, and we know that Paterson is not like, for example, Jersey City, or it's not like Salem County or Salem City, right? So it's just that contextual factor is really important. So I was curious about hearing your thoughts about that and what your thoughts on like kind of coalitions and how best to kind of create them and form them.
Sure. Yeah, and you're right. You and I have talked about this. And newsflash for everybody, Sarah and I have things that we don't agree on as well, right? But what I mentioned to Sarah, especially in the discussion about coalitions and food policy councils, food policy and food security, so there's two major, there's so many ways that I could answer that, Sarah, and you and I were just talking about it this morning, right? So, but I'll do it like this, and then, you and I can take it further. Two phrases or terms that keep getting brought up a lot as food security and nutrition as a way of combating hunger at the root cause, as those things start to really come to the forefront more and more, two phrases or two terms that I keep hearing a lot: food policy councils and regional food hubs, right? And food policy councils focusing on policy and defining policy and influencing policy, and regional food hubs. What is the localization of food access programs, home delivery, food supply, urban ag look like? In my mind, regional food hub work should be present and be at the table at food policy councils, and food policy councils need to be present at regional food hub work. And that takes leaders on all sides participating with great intention and dedicating time to it. For those of you that manage frontline organizations right now, I was one of you, right? And so I know every day we're slammed. A lot of community-based organizations are serving the same amount of people that you were serving in 2020. And we knew, all of us here on this call, many of us knew that this was going to be the case, right, Sarah? So there's very little time because you have to focus on the day-to-day. There's very little time to participate in a policy conversation, right? And at the same time, creating policy change takes so much effort and so much work that sometimes it's hard to find time to be present on the front lines, working with leaders that are actually doing food access and food purchasing, and listening, participating in listening sessions with people in community and community leaders. But Sarah, whatever we call it, whether we say like we should all be working towards regional food hubs or food policy councils, I think the first step is we all have to agree on how can we come together, what can we participate in each other's activities, and what are the deliverables that we can work towards together. I'm very much a person, especially in housing, it would happen a lot. People would say, hey, Mark, we've got this great framework for, safe, stable, humane housing. And I would always say, well, has it been field tested? And they'd say, what does field testing mean? And I would say, give it to me and my team, and we'll field test it. But the only way I was part of those conversations and knew about those frameworks is because I actually personally dedicated time to participating into the not higher level conversations, to the conversations on the other side of the fence.
Right, absolutely. I think one thing that I constantly talk to my team about is the need to move towards upstream action, right? So we have to, keep helping people on the front lines where they need it right now, but we also need to move the needle before they get there, right? Our mission should be to kind of put those community food pantries and the food banks out of business, right? We want to make sure that there's enough food that is plentiful and accessible and affordable in the communities, that no one ever has to go to a food pantry again, right? And so that should be our goal, right? Our big goal. How to get there is going to be really hard because, like you said, we have to balance the immediate needs of folks with the long and sustained action for policy, right?
And I'll tell you personally, Sarah, and I'm sure this doesn't surprise you. You and I haven't had this conversation, but this is definitely a conversation I was having all the time with my old board. Pre-pandemic, right? Like service numbers on a month would go down, and somebody would ask me, "Oh, Mark, so that's not good, because then how do we communicate that to funders?" And I would say, actually, no, that is really good, because the mission of again, take everything I say with a grain of salt, guys. The mission of a nonprofit should be to put itself out of business, because nonprofits, we exist because something is broken in the communities we're serving, and we are the Band-Aid, right? So unless we're all cool with really fancy Band-Aids, right? A better thing is if community is able to say, we're so grateful to you, Band-Aid, but we don't need the Band-Aid anymore. And very quickly, Sarah, I'll share with you, I saw that on two anecdotes where I was like, that's so dope. That's what we should be working towards. We had a mom that we were working with say, you know, I don't think I want to be on Section 8 anymore. And we actually helped her to be able to, go through that progression. And then we also had one mom come to us like really victorious and proud. And she was like, I was on the phone with, I was on the phone with an office and they were talking about my benefits. And I was like, you know what? That's okay. I'm good. And she hung up on him. She's like so proud to say that she hung up on him. That's because she had a job and she was more secure. There's got to be a way to scale that up.
Yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Mark, for your time. I know this has been so interesting and exciting for me, and I hope the same for all those who are listening today. And we will share any comments or questions we get from folks listening with you, and hopefully we'll keep engaging this interesting conversation, keep the conversation going for sure.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you. Shout out to the NJFDC leadership team, Janine, Karen, and then to all of you that are participating that are some of my collaborative partners. Thank you for all that you do, especially those of you like on the front lines of this. Thank you for what you do. Y'all are heroes.
Right. Take care.